Well, to discuss this, let's go to Boston, where we're joined by Bolsonaro supporter and CEO of the Public Administration Institute, Julio Morais. And in Buenos Aires is Flavia Carbonari. She's an associate member of the Brazil Forum for Public Security. We reached out to the Brazilian government for comment, but we received no response. Let me start with you, Julio. We see this news that almost 60 inmates were killed, 16 decapitated. We read reports that they were playing football with the heads in the prison riot. And we think this is absolutely crazy. And then Brazilians tell us, you know what, this is crazy, but it's not new. It's normal in our prisons. Why?
Well, thanks for having me here once again. It's something that happened for the last couple of years. I think the message is clear. If you don't want to deal with the Brazilian prison, don't commit a crime. Unfortunately, that's the way Brazilian prisoners deal with each other. But I don't think it's nothing that the government can do, but I think it's better to deal with the good people outside, the victim families who lost their family or suffered some kind of crime because of those individuals, instead of taking care of them.
But
and
Julio,
let's be clear.
Julio, it sounds almost as if you're saying, well, if you committed a crime, you go to prison, you can expect to be decapitated in a gang war because that's just prison. That shouldn't be prison, should it?
Well, prison is not a vacation destiny. Let's put it this way. There's a lot of people homeless in Brazil that doesn't have a shelter, doesn't have a food. Why, if you commit a crime and go to prison, you're gonna have food and shelter. So it should be the other way around. Brazilian law don't allow capital punishment. At least if they do something, if this gang war battle start to continue, at least those are criminals being suffering the consequence, not the good people outside.
Okay, so I want to add to what Julio's saying by quoting to you, Flavia, what Bolsonaro himself said. These guys, criminals, are going to die in the streets like cockroaches, and that's how it should be. We have to give a legal backup to the security people, civil, military, federal, road police. With that in mind, contextualize this for me as to the approach to criminal justice in Brazil, and whether what we have seen with the riot especially is just a manifestation of that approach, Flavia.
Well, thanks for having me here, and I'm glad you brought up the comments made by the president, which I think Julio just made statements that are very similar to that. I think that type of rhetoric is very concerning because having overcrowded prisons and inmates in terrible human conditions, as we know is the case in Brazil, is only fitting to the problems that we are seeing now. We know that drug factions, they are pretty much in charge of several of the prisons that we have in Brazil right now. And under those conditions, you are just allowing them to fill in the gaps that the state is not providing, right? So there's a set of measures that are included in the penal law that are supposed to be provided within the penitentiary systems that is not provided, such as health, such as education, jobs. And I'm not even talking about the basic human standards. We have a really, really high rate of overcrowded prisons. In Brazil right now, you have 750,000 inmates, and that is 70% over the capacity that the country has to have those populations. So you can imagine the situation in which they are living, which just allows criminal organizations from within to organize themselves and take control even better. So it even makes it worse. In response to what Julio was saying, it just makes it worse. It won't help the situation to have them under those conditions.
So Julio, certainly. Yeah, let me get a response from Julio. So Julio, you have overcrowding, as Flavia has mentioned, right? There's often not enough money to go into prisons. And you have cartels and gangs that are waging war on each other outside of the prisons and inside of the prisons. With all of that in mind, isn't that an opportunity for the government to rethink everything rather than saying, oh, well, we don't care. Once we lock you up, you can kill each other. You deserve it.
It is. It's a big opportunity for the government, the current administration, to review the policy that we have in place right now regarding prison and the inmates. However, we have a big population outside of the prison trying to get a job, try to get education, try to get the basic needs. I think those people need to worry about first instead of the people in the prison. Let's remember, commit a crime is an option. It's not just someone they pick up out of the street and put in prison. They commit a crime. Those people have affect life of many other people outside, people that are trying to work, try to live a normal life, and they came and choose to commit a crime. So I'll be honest with you. I think the government should take a look at and review the policies we have in place right now. But I think we have other priorities like education, health, shelter for those that are outside, trying to make the basic needs to give food on the table of the family.
Flavia Carbonari, address that for us. The Brazilian government should prioritize people who are outside of prisons, not those inside prisons.
I think one thing doesn't exclude the other. Brazil has extremely high rates of violence. We have homicides, 65,000 homicides per year. And if we don't address, of course, some of the things that Julio mentioned are also things that we need to address to prevent people to engage in crime activities. That's for sure. But the policies that we have right now in the justice system of mass incarceration, which has been going on for, it's not this administration in particular, it has been going on before that. So putting into jail minor offenders for small drug possessions, you have 40% of the inmates today waiting trial. You are just putting a lot of people in places that have become schools of crime. So these people, you are just putting more people in a place where they are going to be trained, where organized crime has been able to strengthen themselves. It should be mentioned that the massacres, the numbers that you gave in the beginning, these massacres that happened just now, there have been more than 10 over the past 10 years, more than 300 deaths. Right. And what happens now is that the two major drug factions in the country that were both from the southeast, from Rio and Sao Paulo, have spread over the country. They are fighting in other states through local gangs, so getting support from local gangs. And the major drug faction that we have today in Brazil, PCC, originated from within the prison. That's how they started. And today they're the biggest criminal organization in Brazil. So to keep just putting people in jail in those conditions where minor offenders get in touch with very high, dangerous criminals, it won't solve the problem. It won't solve the problem. And I think you need to address both things. Of course, we need to invest in education, in health, but you can't just wait till you see more of these situations happening. We had a very similar one happening 2 years ago, also in a northern state. So we need to do something. We need to address these issues as well. And more violence will not address the problem of endemic violence that we have in the country.
Flavia, I want you to have a little listen to Otávio Rego Barros, the presidential press secretary, in the aftermath of this massacre. Have a listen.
Minister Sergio Moro regrets the deaths and is determining how to step up intelligence actions. National forces stand ready.
What's interesting, Flavia, is that when we hear Barros speak, he says intelligence actions, national forces. This sounds, purely about military might or intel in order to fight. Is that just looking at it in a one-dimensional way?
I think so. I think if you keep the measures in those terms, it really is just looking into one dimension, and it won't solve the most structural problems, like I was saying before, the mass incarceration that we have been doing that have led to the incarceration in Brazil to more than double in a decade, and homicide rates have been increasing. So if you were to argue that that's solving anything, it's not.
Right.
The problem is increasing as well. And when he mentions intelligence, and of course the government has talked about it even before this administration, about increasing the jail security in jails, and sending the most dangerous ones to federal prison systems that have more stronger measures, and that trying to prevent them to connect to other prisoners. But under the conditions that we have today, with the numbers that we have, and again, you are sort of allowing them to recruit more and more members from within the prison when you're sending the people to jail. So if you don't address first alternative sentence for minor crimes, if you don't address, for example, today I mentioned 40% of the inmates are waiting trial, and we have a clearance rate of homicides of 22% on average in the country. That means you do not have the guys that really, really should be in prison are not there. So there's a very, very famous in Brazil that is we arrest a lot, but we arrest very poorly. So it's a matter of improving the quality of criminal investigation and having other alternatives for minor crimes, such as community services, house arrest, electronic monitoring. There are several things that could be offered for different types of crimes. And you should invest in criminal investigation to be able to arrest the ones that should really, really be inside prison. But to continue like this, we're just going to be seeing more and more of these rebellions and massacres, also because of the infights that are growing among the two, the main criminal factions.
So Julio Morais, according to the best available evidence that I have, government statistics, about 54% of the prison population in Brazil are males between the ages of 18 and 29, right? They don't have much education. Many of them come from poor families. So earlier in the discussion, you were saying, well, you know, you made your choice, you committed a crime, you go to jail, you have to deal with the consequences. But honestly speaking, Julio, at 18, you're a kid in a poor neighborhood. Maybe your crime might have been a very small one. It might have been getting caught up in a gang, or it might have just been stealing a bicycle or something like that. I don't know, right? But you're a kid. Why have you closed the door to rehabilitating these young men? Why are you not open to the idea that somebody could go to prison and come out a changed person, rather than somebody going into a hellhole and a war zone and becoming fundamentally evil if you're witnessing all that stuff? If you survive all that stuff, if you survive all these massacres, you're probably going to end up becoming a real villain, right?
Yes, I agree with Flavia regarding the minor crime. You should be other options for them: electronic monitoring, community service, many other options that could be in place of. However, I think the only investment that the government can do to avoid that, avoid overcrowded prisons, is through education. Instead of building prison, building schools, so we can prepare kids so they can understand the consequence of the actions. That's my point of view. Regarding the minor committing crime, like 18 years old, 20 years old, we've seen a lot of people younger than that commit like dangerous crime, like killing, kidnapping, rape. I see in my office, I practice law here in Massachusetts, and I see a lot of cases. People live in Brazil, hard work people live in Brazil because the Brazilian justice failed to protect them.
And just days after, Flavia, just days after the massacre, also a viral video that came out, and I guess this is somewhat, connected to it. And I'll end with this, Flavia. We had Clauvinho da Silva, the Brazilian drug trafficker, who dressed up as his daughter and tried to escape, and he was caught, and then just a couple days later, he was found dead, presumably hanged, allegedly hanged in his cell in Rio de Janeiro. What does that tell us about the Brazilian justice system, if you could find a way to connect that to what we were talking about earlier on?
I mean, it's the very unfortunate conclusions that it's not working. Whatever system we have in place is not working. And I just wanted to go back to one of the things that Julio just said about the people in prison. We need to remember that a lot of these people are going to come back to society one day. So whatever you are doing inside the prison, if we're not working on reinsertion, you are bringing these people much worse back to society, right? So it doesn't serve us either. I agree with him that we need to invest in education and But we also need to try to restructure the justice system in general. Like you said, I think the example you gave just shows that we are failing from beginning to end. So we need several measures from the prevention side, which is addressing, even with youth, as you said, an 18-year-old at this age. Even from a brain development perspective, it is a period of time that you can make change, you can transform these people. So I think we need to work in both fronts.
Okay,
To
Flavia,
change the justice system.
Okay, it's been really good having this discussion with both of you. I appreciate you both taking the time. Flavia Carbonari and Julio Morais, I thank you very much for joining us once again on the Newsmakers.